The haunting screech of metal on metal echoes in your mind, not because it happened to you, but because the mere thought of a runaway trolley forces you into a corner where no outcome feels truly clean. We often tell ourselves that we are rational, moral beings who act based on clear, unwavering values. Yet the moment we are thrust into a hypothetical dilemma, where 5 lives hang in the balance against one, those values begin to fracture under the pressure of cold, hard reality. It is a strange, unsettling sensation to realize that our moral compass, which we rely on to guide our daily lives, can spin wildly when the stakes become life or death. We start by assuming that the right thing to do is simply the math of survival. We save the many by sacrificing the few, a principle that feels logically sound and intuitively correct in the abstract. This mode of thinking, which focuses entirely on the end result, promises a kind of clarity that we crave in a world full of gray areas. If the consequence is the preservation of more human life, how could anyone argue that we should choose a path that leads to greater loss? Yet, as soon as we move from the driver's seat of a trolley to the bridge above the tracks, that ironclad logic starts to dissolve. Suddenly, the act of pushing a single, innocent person to their death to stop the train feels monstrous, even though the final headcount of survivors remains identical to the first scenario. Why does our conscience scream, "Stop," in the second case when it whispered, "Proceed," in the first? This is the paradox that keeps philosophers awake at night and reminds us that our moral framework is far more complex than a simple calculation of lives saved versus lives lost. It suggests that there is a deep, internal resistance to treating human beings as mere instruments to be discarded for the greater good, regardless of how desperate the circumstances may appear to be. We are not just calculators weighing outputs. We are moral agents who care deeply about the integrity of our actions and the boundaries we refuse to cross, even when the alternative seems mathematically superior to our logical brains. This friction between the outcome and the act itself is the doorway into the deepest questions of justice and human nature. When we watch a group of people grapple with these scenarios, we are not just seeing a disagreement over a trolley. We are seeing the clash of 2 fundamental ways of navigating existence. On one side, we have the consequentialists, who look at the world through the lens of results and seek to maximize well-being for the largest number of people. On the other side, we have those who hold on to categorical duties, believing that some actions are inherently wrong, no matter the potential benefits that might follow. The struggle to reconcile these 2 views is what makes us human. It forces us to confront the fact that our moral intuition is not always consistent, and that our values are often in conflict with each other. This is not a weakness. It is the very essence of the human experience. It is the grit in the oyster that eventually produces the pearl of wisdom, if only we are brave enough to keep digging into the uncomfortable truths. When we consider the doctor in the emergency room, the tension reaches a fever pitch because the stakes are no longer a distant machine, but a personal, professional responsibility. 6 people arrive, all in need, but the clock is ticking, and the resources are finite. We instinctively feel that saving the 5 is the right, honorable path. But what happens when we shift the context to the organ transplant surgeon who could kill 1 healthy patient to save 5 others? The math remains the same, 1 life traded for 5. Yet, almost no one would endorse the surgeon's choice, revealing that our moral reasoning is deeply suspicious of active participation in creating death. We distinguish between letting someone die as a result of tragic circumstances and actively orchestrating a death to solve a problem. This distinction feels essential to our sense of justice, even if it defies the simple utilitarian logic that we otherwise accept. It tells us that for most people, the how matters just as much as the what. This realization is both liberating and terrifying. It means that we cannot simply hide behind formulas or delegate our moral judgment to a set of pre-approved rules. Every time we face a moral choice, we are essentially forced to build our own ethical house from the ground up, brick by brick. We are constantly navigating the space between the rigid requirements of duty and the messy, unpredictable consequences of our actions. The fact that we struggle with these hypotheticals is a testament to our capacity for empathy and our desire to live in a world where human life is not just a variable in an equation. We are searching for a way to be good, to do right, and to live with ourselves after the decisions are made. The trolley problem is not just a game played in a classroom. It is a mirror reflecting our own internal battles with conscience, duty, and the limits of our own control. As we journey further into these philosophical debates, we find that the questions are not getting easier, they are only getting deeper. The goal is not to find a single, final answer that will satisfy everyone, but to awaken the critical faculty that allows us to examine our own beliefs. We are learning that our initial, gut-level reactions are only the beginning of a much longer conversation. Philosophy is not a destination where we arrive at a perfect set of rules. It is a process, a continuous, often restless state of questioning. It demands that we look at our own lives, our politics, and our personal conduct with a fresh eye, questioning the assumptions that we have taken for granted since childhood. It is a process of unlearning as much as it is learning, and it requires a high degree of intellectual humility to admit when our initial judgments were flawed or incomplete. Consider the societal implications of these dilemmas, where the lives of citizens are weighed against public policy decisions. Governments and leaders are constantly forced to make choices that mirror these trolley problems, choosing between competing interests and limited resources. When we vote or when we advocate for a cause, we are essentially taking a stand on which moral philosophy should guide our collective future. Should we be guided by a utilitarian desire to maximize the overall happiness of society, even at the cost of individual rights? Or should we stand firm on categorical protections that ensure no individual is ever sacrificed for the common good, even if it means missing out on potential aggregate benefits? These are not just theoretical questions. They are the bedrock of our political life, shaping everything from healthcare systems to economic policies and the fundamental liberties that define our democracy. There is a profound, almost poetic irony in the fact that we study these ancient thinkers to understand our very modern world. We turn to Aristotle, Kant, and Mill not because they had all the answers, but because they understood that the questions themselves are what define us. By walking in their footsteps, we are participating in a conversation that spans centuries, a dialogue that has survived the rise and fall of empires and the rapid march of technological progress. We are not just reading dusty books. We are engaging with the intellectual architects of our own civilization. Their struggle to make sense of justice is our struggle, and their failure to find a perfect, conflict-free system is proof that there is no shortcut to wisdom. We are left with the responsibility of doing the work ourselves, of constantly reevaluating our stances, and finding the courage to act even when the answers are not entirely clear. The risk of this endeavor, as we have noted, is that it can make us feel untethered from the comfortable, conventional beliefs we once held. When you start pulling at the threads of your own moral certainty, you have to be prepared for the possibility that some of your long-held convictions might unravel. This is the lost innocence that comes with true self-knowledge. It is not an easy process, and it often leads to a period of skepticism where everything seems relative and nothing seems solid. But as the philosophers warn us, skepticism is a resting place, not a home. We cannot live indefinitely in a state of moral paralysis, throwing up our hands and declaring that nothing matters because there are no easy answers. We are wired for action, for decision, and for meaning, and we must find a way to navigate the world even when the compass is spinning. Ultimately, this analysis shows that being a citizen in a complex world requires more than just following the law or adhering to social norms. It requires the courage to think for ourselves. It demands that we hold our leaders, our institutions, and our own personal values to a higher standard of scrutiny. We are not just passengers on a trolley. We are the ones who have the potential to take the steering wheel, to influence the track, and to define what justice looks like for those around us. By engaging in this kind of deep, analytical reflection, we become better equipped to handle the dilemmas of our time, not by having all the answers, but by knowing which questions to ask and understanding why they matter so much. We are invited to keep the restlessness of reason alive, allowing it to drive us toward a more thoughtful, nuanced, and ultimately more humane way of living. Self-correction, ensuring the flow continues without repetition and maintains the analytical documentary tone. The process of moral inquiry is often compared to a journey through unfamiliar territory, where the terrain changes with every step we take. When we look at the history of these trolley dilemmas, we see a recurring pattern of human reaction, showing that across different cultures and generations, we share a deep-seated apprehension toward deliberate harm. This universal reaction suggests that our moral code is deeply embedded, perhaps even evolutionary, designed to protect the social fabric. However, we also have the capacity for high-level reasoning that allows us to override these instincts when the circumstances warrant a different approach. This tension is where our true moral identity is forged. It is not found in the instinct alone, nor in the logic alone, but in the constant negotiation between the two, which requires us to be both sensitive to the human element and capable of broad, analytical thinking. There is a distinct beauty in the discomfort caused by these problems. It proves that we have not become desensitized to the gravity of human life. If we could easily decide to sacrifice one for 5 without any hesitation, we would perhaps be more efficient, but we would be significantly less human. Our hesitation, our doubt, and our desire to find a better way are the markers of a moral society. They represent the barrier we place between ourselves and the cold, unfeeling utility of a machine. This hesitation is the foundation upon which human rights are built. It is the recognition that every individual possesses a value that cannot be reduced to a mere number. When we honor that hesitation, we are upholding the very idea that individuals are ends in themselves, and not just means to an end for someone else. In the realm of documentary analysis, we often look for the human touch, the way in which abstract concepts manifest in the lives of real people. The trolley problem is a perfect vehicle for this because it brings out the raw, unpolished responses that define us. When we hear someone argue for saving the 5, they are speaking from a place of compassion for the collective. When someone argues against pushing the man off the bridge, they are speaking from a place of reverence for the individual. Both voices are necessary. Both voices speak to a part of the truth. A healthy, functioning society is one that can hold these two perspectives in a state of constant, productive tension, rather than choosing one and silencing the other. This is the essence of democracy, the ability to disagree on fundamental principles while remaining committed to a shared, civilized existence. We must also consider the role of context. In a vacuum, a trolley problem is a simple puzzle. But in the real world, context is everything. The identity of the individuals, the nature of the emergency, and the history of our interactions with those involved all change the landscape of our decision-making. We are not acting in a vacuum. We are acting in a world filled with history, relationships, and consequences that extend far beyond the immediate moment. The right thing to do is rarely static. It is fluid, depending on the specific circumstances. This is why strict, universal rules often fail us when we try to apply them to the complexities of real life. We need a more flexible approach, one that values both the goal of minimizing suffering and the duty to respect individual dignity. The educational aspect of this inquiry cannot be overstated. By studying these cases, we are essentially training our moral muscles, preparing them for the moments when we will inevitably face real-world dilemmas. We may never be forced to choose between 5 workers on a track and 1 on a side track, but we will face situations where our actions will affect the lives and well-being of others. We will have to make choices that are difficult, unpopular, or even painful. By having already navigated the ethical landscapes of these hypotheticals, we are better prepared to act with clarity, conviction, and compassion. We are building a mental library of principles and counterprinciples that will inform our judgment in the critical moments of our lives, ensuring that we do not act out of impulse, but out of considered, thoughtful intent. As we look toward the future, we can see that the challenges will only increase. With advancements in technology, artificial intelligence, and global interconnectedness, the scale of our moral dilemmas is expanding. We are increasingly facing problems where our reach, both good and bad, is global. The ethical frameworks we use to navigate these challenges will determine the kind of future we create for ourselves and for those who follow. We need to be more deliberate than ever in our moral reasoning, more willing to question our assumptions, and more committed to the pursuit of justice. This is not just a job for the philosophers, it is a job for all of us. Every single person who cares about the world we live in is a participant in this great, ongoing experiment of moral living. The power of this analysis lies in its ability to bring us back to the basics, to strip away the distractions and focus on the core of what it means to be a person among people. It reminds us that at the end of the day, our actions leave a footprint. We leave a legacy not just in what we achieve, but in how we achieve it, and in the sacrifices we were or were not willing to make. The weight of this responsibility can be heavy, but it is also what gives our lives dignity and purpose. When we embrace this, we are not just living, we are actively constructing a moral universe, one decision at a time. It is a daunting task, but it is one that we are all, by virtue of our humanity, destined to perform. In the end, the trolley problem acts as a mirror that forces us to look into our own souls and see what we value most. Do we value the numbers, the outcomes, the stability of the collective? Or do we value the sanctity of the individual, the integrity of the act, and the moral boundaries that must never be crossed? Most of us, if we are honest, value both. And that is why the conflict is so persistent and why it never truly resolves. We are creatures of both logic and emotion, both pragmatism and principle. And as we continue this exploration, we should embrace that duality. It is the source of our struggle, but it is also the source of our greatness. It is what allows us to strive for a world that is both effective in its action and noble in its character. This exploration also highlights the importance of dialogue. We have seen how people's initial reactions can be challenged, nuanced, and even changed by hearing the perspectives of others. This is the power of the public square, the importance of free speech, and the value of a society that encourages open, honest, and rigorous debate. When we listen to each other, when we challenge each other's assumptions, and when we work together to find common ground, we are not just solving a puzzle. We are strengthening the ties that bind us together. We are learning how to live in a diverse, complex world where there are many different ways of thinking about what is right and wrong, and where we must find a way to coexist and collaborate for the sake of a better future. As we conclude this first part of our journey, let the weight of these questions settle in. Do not rush to find a final, easy answer. Instead, allow the restlessness of reason to persist. Let it nag at you, let it keep you thinking, and let it guide you toward a deeper understanding of your own moral compass. The story is not over, it is just beginning. Every day and every choice, you are writing the next chapter of this story. You are the protagonist, the thinker, and the actor in your own life. And as we move into the next phase of our investigation, keep the focus on the reality that these questions are about you. They are about the choices you make, the values you hold, and the person you are becoming. The adventure of moral discovery is yours to embrace. Part 2. The persistence of these ethical puzzles, despite centuries of rigorous debate, serves as a testament to the fact that they are not mere academic exercises. They are reflections of our most fundamental human concerns. When we dig deeper into the divide between the utilitarian outlook and the categorical duty-based approach, we are really uncovering the two primary gears that turn the engine of human civilization. We need the consequentialist perspective to run our institutions, manage our resources, and address systemic issues that affect millions. We cannot manage a modern economy or a global public health crisis without weighing costs and benefits, and without looking at the aggregate outcome of our decisions. Utility is the language of efficiency, and in a world where resources are inevitably limited, efficiency is a form of moral imperative. We cannot afford to ignore the consequences of our policies, and those who do so often find that their idealism leads to unintended suffering for the very people they intended to help. However, the categorical view acts as the necessary check on this machine-like efficiency, providing the moral guardrails that keep us from sliding into a cold, transactional existence. It is the voice of human rights, the declaration that there are certain things we simply cannot do to one another, regardless of the potential for a better outcome. This is the foundation of our legal systems, our ethical codes, and our social contracts. Without this categorical protection, the individual would be entirely subordinate to the collective, leading to a world where the rights of the few are routinely sacrificed to satisfy the preferences or the needs of the majority. The tension between these two forces is what prevents us from becoming either heartless technocrats or paralyzed, ineffective idealists. It is a delicate, often uncomfortable balance, but it is the balance upon which a truly free and just society rests. When we consider the historical application of these philosophies, we see that the consequences have been profound. Totalitarian regimes, for example, have often justified their horrific actions by appealing to a perverted form of utilitarianism, arguing that the suffering of the few is a necessary price to pay for the glorious future of the many. In these cases, the consequence-based reasoning was weaponized to destroy the very idea of individual rights. This is the danger that those in the minority in our trolley discussions were sensing when they feared that such thinking could lead to genocide. When you strip away the categorical belief in the inherent value of the human person, you leave nothing but the math, and the math can be easily manipulated to serve the ends of those in power. This is why we must never abandon our categorical commitments, even when the temptation to focus solely on the outcome is strong. Conversely, an uncompromising adherence to categorical rules can also lead to disastrous results when it results in total inaction. If we were to hold so strictly to the idea that we must never interfere in the course of events, we might find ourselves standing by while tragedy unfolds, unable to act even when we could have easily prevented a catastrophe. This is the trap of moral absolutism, where the purity of our own conscience becomes more important than the actual impact we have on the world. It is a form of self-centeredness, a desire to keep our own hands clean while the world around us burns. We need a balance that allows for responsible action, a way of engaging with the world that acknowledges both the necessity of results and the limitations of our moral reach. This is the challenge that faces every generation, to find a path that is both effective and ethical. The complexity of these issues is perhaps most evident in the way we handle technological innovation, particularly in the development of autonomous systems. Consider the self-driving car, which will eventually be programmed to make the same kinds of split-second decisions as the trolley driver. How do we program a machine to value human life? Do we teach it to prioritize the lives of its passengers, or do we prioritize the lives of pedestrians? If it is forced to choose between hitting a child and hitting an adult, or between hitting one person or 5, what is the correct, programmed response? These are no longer just hypothetical questions. They are engineering problems that are being solved right now in laboratories and boardrooms. The way we answer these questions will shape the future of our transportation, and by extension, the way we perceive the value of human life in an automated world. The fact that we are outsourcing these moral decisions to machines should be a wake-up call to all of us. It means that we are encoding our ethical frameworks into the very infrastructure of our society. If we have not done the work of figuring out what we truly value and where we draw our lines, we are going to leave those decisions to the programmers, the engineers, and the corporations that are building these technologies. That is a dangerous abdication of our responsibility. We must be involved in the conversation, not as distant observers, but as active participants who are committed to ensuring that our technology reflects our highest ideals, not just our most efficient instincts. This is the new frontier of ethics, and it is a battleground where the stakes could not be higher. Moreover, these debates highlight the importance of emotional intelligence and empathy. It is easy to be cold when we are talking about abstractions in a classroom, but it is much harder when we are dealing with real people in real-world scenarios. The way we feel about a situation is often a vital piece of information about its moral reality. Our empathy is a tool that helps us understand the impact of our actions on others, and it is a critical component of any truly ethical decision-making process. We should not dismiss our feelings as irrational. We should instead try to understand what they are telling us about the situation. Are we feeling fear, guilt, a sense of injustice? These are signals that we need to pay attention to, as they often reveal hidden complexities that our logical reasoning might otherwise ignore. This is why the inclusion of diverse perspectives is so vital. We all have different experiences, backgrounds, and cultural influences that shape our moral intuition. When we bring these diverse voices together to discuss these dilemmas, we expand the scope of our understanding. We hear things we might never have thought of. We encounter challenges to our deepest beliefs, and we are forced to reconsider the foundations of our own thinking. This is the beauty of the public debate. It is not about winning an argument. It is about learning and growing together. It is about building a shared understanding that is more robust, more nuanced, and more inclusive than any single person could achieve on their own. We must also be wary of the tendency to become cynical. It is very easy to look at the persistence of these arguments and decide that nothing can ever be resolved. But as we've discussed, cynicism is an evasion. It is a way of protecting ourselves from the difficulty of the work. It is much easier to say, everyone has their own truth, than it is to engage with the possibility that there might be a better or worse way to live. But we are capable of more than that. We are capable of reasoning, of reflection, and of growth. We should embrace the challenge of these questions, not because we expect to reach a final, perfect answer, but because the process itself makes us more capable of dealing with the complexities of life. The role of the educator or the facilitator in these discussions is crucial. They are not there to provide the answers, but to provide the tools. They are there to challenge our assumptions, to push us deeper into the questions, and to ensure that the conversation remains respectful and productive. They are the guardians of the process, and their role is to foster an environment where we can safely explore the most uncomfortable parts of ourselves and our world. We should be grateful for such spaces, as they are the true laboratories of democracy. They are where we learn to think, to argue, and to live with the tension of being human. Consider the impact of these discussions on our sense of community. When we can talk about life and death dilemmas with our neighbors and peers, we are practicing the kind of deep, substantive communication that is so often missing from our public discourse. We are building the trust that is necessary for a society to function. We are learning that even when we disagree, we can do so with mutual respect and a shared commitment to the common good. This is a radical act in an age of polarization. It is a way of saying that despite our differences, we are all part of the same human project, and we are all responsible for the health and vitality of that project. The intellectual rigor required for this kind of thinking is a discipline. It is not something that comes naturally. It is something that must be developed over time. We need to be willing to do the reading, to follow the arguments, and to subject our own beliefs to the same level of scrutiny that we apply to others. We need to be patient with ourselves and with each other as we work through these complex, multifaceted issues. We should not expect to become experts overnight. Instead, we should aim for a steady, incremental progress in our ability to think clearly, to reason ethically, and to act with a sense of purpose. When we look back at the historical figures we study, we see that they were not perfect either. They were also struggling with these same questions, and their work is a reflection of their own intellectual and moral growth. We can learn from their successes and their failures. We can build upon their insights and avoid their mistakes. We are not starting from scratch. We are part of a long, unfolding story. We are standing on the shoulders of giants, and it is our responsibility to see further and to continue the work they started. There is also something to be said for the role of art and storytelling in this process. When we explore these themes through literature, film, and drama, we are able to engage with them in a way that is less abstract and more visceral. We can see the characters grappling with their own choices, and we can empathize with their struggle in a way that informs our own moral reasoning. These stories are a way of making the abstract concrete, and they are essential for keeping the conversation alive and relevant to our daily lives. We are also learning to recognize the signs of manipulation. When we see arguments that are designed to bypass our reason and appeal solely to our emotions, we should be skeptical. We should be trained to identify the logical fallacies, the selective use of data, and the dehumanizing language that often characterizes these kinds of appeals. We should be vigilant about protecting our capacity for independent thought, and we should be proud to be people who insist on asking the hard questions, even when the answers are not popular. This commitment to clarity and truth is what ultimately protects us from the dangers of demagoguery. When a society is composed of individuals who think for themselves, who understand the principles that guide their decisions, and who are willing to engage in honest, open debate, it becomes much harder for any one person or ideology to control the narrative. We are building a defense system that is rooted in the intellectual and moral integrity of our citizens. This is the most powerful weapon we have against the forces of division and intolerance. So, as we move through this, let us hold on to the conviction that our efforts matter. The way we think, the way we argue, and the way we act are all pieces of a larger puzzle. We are participating in the creation of a moral culture, one that values thoughtfulness, respect, and a commitment to justice. This is a slow, difficult, and often frustrating process, but it is the only way to ensure that our future is one that we can all be proud to inhabit. The journey is not about arriving at a destination. It is about the way we travel. It is about the quality of our attention, the depth of our reflection, and the integrity of our conduct. It is about becoming the kind of person who is capable of making hard choices with grace and responsibility. This is the true meaning of the restless reason that we have been discussing. It is a call to action, a challenge to live fully, and a guide to navigating the complexities of our existence. As we move into the final stages of this exploration, let us keep our focus sharp. Let us not lose sight of the fact that we are the ones who are in charge of our own moral evolution. We are the ones who have the power to shape the future of our society, and we are the ones who have the responsibility to make it a better place for everyone. The path ahead may be uncertain, but it is one that we walk together. And in that, there is more than enough reason to keep going.